Willow Creek, Vermont was a place where life moved at a slower pace. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, its small-town charm attracted those seeking tranquility. But on the cold evening of November 14th, that peaceful facade was shattered when 24-year-old Emily Clark vanished without a trace. Emily had recently married Adam Clark, a 27-year-old auto mechanic known for his hard-working demeanor, but also his troubled past. Adam had struggled with substance use during his early 20s, experimenting heavily with marijuana. Although he had been clean for over a year, traces of his impulsive nature and controlling tendencies lingered in their relationship. To their friends and neighbors, the couple seemed like a picture of newlywed bliss, but behind closed doors, tension had been building. That night, neighbors later reported hearing raised voices coming from the Clark residence. Emily had reportedly packed her things, ready to spend the night at her mother's house. But instead of leaving in her car, she had walked out into the dark, carrying only a small handbag. Her last known location was her home on Elm Street, a quiet lane lined with modest houses. The wind howled through the trees, and the streetlights cast long, eerie shadows on the pavement. Emily's steps faded into the darkness, marking the beginning of her unexplained disappearance. The next morning, when Emily failed to show up at her mother's house or answer any calls, her family became alarmed. Her car remained parked in the driveway of the house she shared with Adam. Inside the car, investigators later discovered her purse and phone, undisturbed. It was as though she had intended to return, but never made it back. Adam's account of the night was simple yet troubling. He claimed Emily had stormed out after an argument and said she needed some air. He insisted he believed she was heading to her mother's home, a few miles away. However, his indifferent demeanor raised questions among those closest to Emily. The young teacher's friends described her as someone who would never leave without informing her family or taking essential belongings. Something didn't add up. Across the street from the Clark residence, Martha Anderson, an elderly neighbor, recounted hearing unusual sounds that night. She had been watching television when she heard what sounded like an argument. Shortly after, she recalled hearing the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming, followed by the engine of what she described as a large vehicle. Unable to see clearly from her window, Martha dismissed it as routine noise in the neighborhood. As the hours passed, concern grew. Emily's family reported her missing to the police that afternoon. Officers arrived at the Clark residence to conduct an initial inquiry. Adam's demeanor was cooperative, yet oddly detached. He reiterated his claim that Emily had left on foot and denied knowing anything about her disappearance. The officers examined her car, noting the peculiar detail of her belongings being left behind. If Emily intended to stay away, why would she leave her essentials behind? The authorities expanded their search radius, but as the first night of Emily's disappearance came to a close, no immediate clues emerged. The once quiet town of Willow Creek was now gripped by a growing unease. Rumors spread quickly, and whispers of what might have happened to Emily began circulating among the townsfolk. It was only the beginning of an investigation that would unravel a dark and disturbing truth, one that lay hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic lives. The morning after Emily Clark's disappearance, the small town of Willow Creek stirred with unease. The police had begun piecing together the scant details of the previous night, but the threads were thin, frayed by a lack of witnesses and hard evidence. It was as if Emily had vanished into the cold, dark air of Vermont's November night. Emily's mother, Karen Harper, paced anxiously in her modest living room. The sight of Emily's empty car in Adam's driveway the day before had sent a chill down her spine. Karen was a cautious woman, quick to notice inconsistencies, and her instincts told her that something was amiss. She had raised Emily to be responsible, to value communication, and to never leave her family in the dark. Yet now, hours had stretched into a full day, and no one could explain why Emily had failed to call, return home, or show up at work. Her absence was a sharp contrast to her reliable nature. Detectives from the Willow Creek Police Department interviewed Adam Clark again that morning. In his small kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint aroma of stale coffee filled the silence between questions. Adam repeated his account of the evening without faltering. Emily had been upset, and after their argument, she had stormed out, claiming she needed time alone. He said he assumed she had gone to her mother's house and didn't think to follow her. His story seemed straightforward, yet the lack of concern in his voice left the officers uneasy. There were no tears, no frantic worry, only a mechanical recounting of events. The investigators asked Adam about his relationship with Emily. He admitted that their arguments had become more frequent over the past few weeks, especially after Emily had mentioned feeling stifled in their marriage. When pressed for details, Adam grew defensive, insisting that he had given Emily all the space she needed. His tone, though calm on the surface, carried an undertone of resentment that the detectives could not ignore. Meanwhile, the forensic team examined Emily's car. Though it was parked neatly in Adam's driveway, its interior seemed oddly untouched. Her purse rested on the passenger seat and her phone lay inside, powered off. The lack of disarray suggested that Emily had left willingly, yet her choice to leave her belongings behind contradicted the idea of an intentional absence. A faint smear on the driver's side door handle caught the attention of one technician. Under the harsh light of the forensic tools, the mark appeared reddish-brown, and a quick swab was taken for further analysis. Across the street, Martha Anderson had been watching the flurry of police activity with a mix of curiosity and dread. A lifelong resident of Willow Creek, she knew the Clark family by sight, if not personally. To Martha, Emily had always seemed like a sweet young woman with a bright future, a stark contrast to Adam, whose demeanor she found unsettling. The previous night's noises had left her uneasy, and now, seeing the investigation unfold, she couldn't shake the feeling that she might have heard something significant. Summoning her courage, she approached one of the officers stationed outside Adam's house to share what little she knew. Martha's account of the argument and the sound of a car door slamming added a new layer to the investigation. It contradicted Adam's claim that Emily had left on foot and hinted at the involvement of a vehicle. When asked if she had seen anyone, Martha shook her head, apologizing for not having looked outside her window. Her regret was palpable, but the detail she provided, a large vehicle leaving the area, was enough to warrant further scrutiny. That afternoon, detectives widened their search. They canvassed local businesses for security footage, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily or the vehicle in question. A break came when the manager of a gas station near Elm Street handed over surveillance recordings from the previous night. The footage, though grainy, showed Emily entering a dark pickup truck around 10:15 p.m. The truck's make and model were unclear, but the timestamp matched the timeline established by Martha's testimony. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Who was driving the truck? Why had Emily gotten inside? And most importantly, where had she gone afterward? The detectives began tracing possible connections to Adam, as well as anyone in his circle who might own such a vehicle. Suspicion inevitably fell on Evan Foster, Adam's closest friend and frequent visitor to the Clark home. Known for his outgoing nature and checkered past, Evan had a reputation in Willow Creek for skirting the line between troublemaker and loyal confidant. Evan's initial interview with police was brief and seemingly cooperative. He admitted to visiting Adam earlier that evening, but denied any knowledge of Emily's disappearance. When asked about his whereabouts after leaving Adam's house, his answers became vague, and he struggled to recall specific details. Despite his apparent willingness to assist, his demeanor suggested he was holding something back. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in Willow Creek had shifted from quiet concern to palpable tension. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, speculating about what might have happened to Emily. The police, though methodical in their approach, felt the pressure mounting. Each lead seemed to uncover another layer of mystery, a missing piece in a puzzle that refused to come together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, one thing became increasingly clear. Emily's disappearance was no simple case of a runaway bride. Something darker lurked beneath the surface, and uncovering the truth would take the investigators deeper into the lives of those closest to her. Lives that were far more complex and fractured than they appeared. The third day of Emily Clark's disappearance began with a chilling discovery. Early that morning, a local jogger along the Ridgewood River reported finding a scarf tangled in the underbrush near the riverbank. The item was identified as belonging to Emily. Her initials, EC, were stitched into the fabric. This grim find turned the investigation from a missing person case into something far more sinister. Police immediately expanded their search to the area surrounding Ridgewood River. The river, with its dense vegetation and murky waters, presented a daunting challenge. K-9 units scoured the forested banks, while divers prepared to search the icy depths. The sight of flashing lights and search crews along the river attracted onlookers, their whispered speculations adding to the growing tension in Willow Creek. The discovery of the scarf heightened suspicion on Adam Clark, whose alibi continued to show cracks. Forensic analysis of the reddish-brown smear found on Emily's car confirmed it was blood, a match to Emily. Investigators re-examined Adam's timeline. He insisted that he had stayed home after Emily left, yet multiple neighbors reported seeing activity at the house late into the night. The inconsistencies were glaring, but without concrete evidence, Adam remained free. Meanwhile, attention turned to Evan Foster. Detectives subpoenaed his phone records, revealing several calls between him and Adam on the night Emily vanished. The timing of these calls raised red flags, occurring just after Emily was last seen on the gas station footage entering a dark pickup truck. When questioned again, Evan's initial cooperation gave way to defensiveness. He denied any involvement, claiming the calls were about work issues, a weak excuse that failed to hold up under scrutiny. Further digging into Evan's background uncovered a history of minor offenses, trespassing, public intoxication, and one dismissed charge of theft. Though his record was hardly damning, it painted a picture of someone prone to poor decision-making and potentially vulnerable to manipulation. Investigators noted his long-standing loyalty to Adam and began to consider whether Evan might have been complicit in whatever had happened to Emily. The break in the case came from an unlikely source. A clerk at a roadside diner near Ridgewood River came forward with information. She recalled seeing a dark pickup truck parked in the lot around midnight on the night Emily disappeared. Inside, she noticed two men, one visibly agitated, gesturing wildly as they spoke. Though she couldn't identify the men, her description of the truck matched the vehicle seen in the gas station footage. The mounting circumstantial evidence prompted police to obtain a search warrant for Adam's home and garage. The search unearthed a critical piece of evidence, a section of rope stained with what appeared to be blood, hidden in the corner of the garage. Analysis confirmed the blood matched Emily's. The rope was frayed, as though it had been cut hastily, and bore faint impressions consistent with it being tied around something or someone. With this discovery, Adam was brought in for a formal interrogation. His calm facade began to crack under pressure. Faced with the forensic evidence, he admitted to using the rope but claimed it was for securing items in his truck, a flimsy explanation that failed to account for the blood. Detectives pressed harder, confronting him with the timeline inconsistencies and the gas station footage. Adam denied involvement in Emily's disappearance but grew visibly agitated, his composure unraveling. Evan Foster, too, found himself back in the interrogation room. Detectives laid out the evidence linking him to the events of that night. His phone records, the diner witness account, and his proximity to both Adam and Emily. Evan's initial bravado faded as the weight of the evidence pressed down on him. He maintained his innocence but began to falter, his fragmented answers hinting at deeper involvement. The community of Willow Creek watched as the investigation intensified. The once quiet town was now the epicenter of a chilling mystery, its residents caught between sympathy for Emily's family and suspicion toward Adam and Evan. The question loomed over everyone. If Emily's scarf was found by the river, what else lay hidden beneath its dark waters? As the search of Ridgewood River continued, the investigators knew they were on the cusp of uncovering the truth. But with each piece of evidence, the case grew darker, the web of lies and betrayal threatening to consume everyone involved. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, the search team at Ridgewood River made a grim discovery. Weighted down by tangled ropes and partially buried beneath silt, the lifeless body of Emily Clark was pulled from the icy waters. The once optimistic search for a missing person had turned into a homicide investigation. News of the discovery rippled through the town, and the small community braced itself for the unfolding truth. The condition of Emily's body provided crucial, albeit chilling, details. Her wrists bore deep abrasions from the ropes, and forensic experts noted faint bruising around her neck. The autopsy confirmed what investigators feared. Emily had been alive when she entered the water. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, but there were signs of blunt force trauma to her head, a cruel indication of the violence she had endured before her final moments. Back at the station, Adam Clark sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, his composure beginning to erode under the weight of mounting evidence. Detectives laid out the damning details: the blood-stained rope found in his garage, the phone records linking him to Evan Foster during the critical hours, and the witness account of a pickup truck at the diner. Each revelation chipped away at his defense, but Adam continued to deny his involvement, insisting that he had no idea what had happened to his wife. Evan Foster, however, was not as steadfast. Summoned for another round of questioning, his once defiant demeanor had been replaced with nervous agitation. The detectives played a calculated game, presenting Evan with the same evidence they had shown Adam, but tailoring their approach to exploit his vulnerabilities. When confronted with the discovery of Emily's body, Evan's face went pale. He stammered through a series of denials, his words tripping over themselves as his resolve crumbled. In a desperate attempt to deflect blame, Evan began to shift his story. He admitted to being with Adam on the night Emily disappeared, but claimed he had only been there to help out. Pressed for details, Evan revealed that Adam had called him in a panic, saying he needed help with an accident. When Evan arrived, he found Adam in the garage, frantic and sweating, with Emily lying motionless on the floor. According to Evan, Adam insisted it was an argument gone wrong, that he had lost control, and struck Emily in the heat of the moment. Evan's account of what happened next was chilling. He described how Adam had hastily tied Emily's body with rope and loaded her into the back of the truck. Adam had begged for Evan's help in disposing of the body, claiming it was the only way to avoid ruining his life. Torn between loyalty and fear, Evan reluctantly agreed. Together, they drove to Ridgewood River under the cover of darkness, where Adam tied Emily's body to a heavy rock before throwing it into the water. Detectives found Evan's version of events compelling but incomplete. His willingness to implicate Adam seemed genuine, yet his account conveniently downplayed his own role. Investigators suspected that Evan's involvement went beyond mere assistance, and they were determined to uncover the full extent of his actions. To corroborate his story, police obtained a warrant to search Evan's property. There, they discovered additional evidence, a pair of gloves with traces of mud and blood matching samples from Ridgewood River and Emily. With both men now firmly tied to the crime, the case seemed to be coming into focus. Yet, lingering questions remained. What had truly sparked the fatal argument? Was this a moment of passion gone horribly wrong, or was there a darker, premeditated motive lurking beneath the surface? To find answers, detectives revisited the details of Adam and Emily's tumultuous relationship, uncovering a pattern of control and jealousy that painted a disturbing picture. Friends and co-workers of Emily described her as a kind and compassionate person who often kept her struggles private. But in the months leading up to her disappearance, she had confided in a close friend that Adam's behavior had become increasingly erratic. He would frequently check her phone, question her whereabouts, and grow angry at the slightest hint of independence. Emily had mentioned feeling trapped, even considering leaving the marriage, but she feared Adam's reaction. Further examination of Adam's past revealed a history of volatile behavior, fueled by his struggles with substance abuse. Though he had claimed to be clean for over a year, investigators uncovered evidence suggesting that he had recently relapsed. Text messages exchanged between Adam and a known dealer hinted at a purchase made just days before Emily's disappearance. The discovery added another layer of complexity to the case, raising the possibility that his actions had been influenced by drugs. As the pieces of the puzzle began to align, detectives prepared to confront Adam with the full scope of the evidence against him. The image of a remorseful husband clinging to a story of an accident began to unravel, revealing a man desperate to maintain control at any cost. The scars of his past and the weight of his insecurities had driven him to commit an act of unthinkable violence, one that he could no longer explain away. The community of Willow Creek, once united in hope for Emily's safe return, now grappled with the devastating reality of her death. As Adam and Evan faced the consequences of their actions, the town's residents were left to reflect on the warning signs that had gone unnoticed. For Emily's family, the search for justice was only beginning, but the loss of their daughter, sister, and friend would forever leave a void that no verdict could fill. The discovery of Emily's body and Evan's partial confession marked a turning point in the investigation. However, it also opened a maze of unanswered questions. While Evan claimed he was merely an accessory to Adam's crime, investigators couldn't ignore the inconsistencies in his story and the evidence that suggested a deeper involvement. The focus now shifted to building an airtight case, uncovering every hidden detail that could shed light on the events leading to Emily's death. The forensic team meticulously examined the evidence recovered from the Clark garage and Evan's property. The blood-stained rope found in Adam's possession was analyzed further, revealing traces of fibers consistent with the backseat upholstery of Adam's truck. This detail confirmed that Emily had been moved in the vehicle before being dumped in Ridgewood River. Additionally, the gloves found at Evan's house contained a mix of Emily's blood and soil from the riverbank, directly tying him to the disposal of her body. Police also retrieved GPS data from Adam's truck, which provided a detailed timeline of his movements on the night of Emily's disappearance. The data showed that the truck had left the Clark residence at 10:47 p.m., stopped briefly near the gas station where Emily was last seen on camera, and then traveled directly to Ridgewood River. The truck remained near the river for approximately 30 minutes before returning to Adam's home. This timeline aligned almost perfectly with Evan's account, but added pressure on Adam, who continued to deny involvement. Detectives turned their attention to the text messages exchanged between Adam and Evan in the days following Emily's disappearance. The messages painted a picture of two men scrambling to cover their tracks. Adam's messages were filled with veiled references such as, "We need to stick to the story and don't let them rattle you." Evan's replies, though less explicit, hinted at growing anxiety with phrases like, "I can't keep this up, and what if they find something?" Beyond the technical evidence, investigators sought to understand the psychological dynamics between Adam and Evan. Interviews with acquaintances revealed a complex relationship. Adam, despite his outward confidence, relied heavily on Evan for emotional support. Evan, in turn, seemed to gravitate toward Adam's dominant personality, often acting as a follower rather than an equal. This imbalance raised the possibility that Evan's role in the crime extended beyond mere compliance. Perhaps he had been coerced or manipulated. To unravel this dynamic, police brought in a criminal psychologist to assist with the interrogations. The psychologist's analysis suggested that Adam's controlling nature likely extended to his interactions with Evan, exploiting his loyalty and fear of confrontation. This insight gave detectives a strategy. They would focus on Evan's guilt and fear, pushing him to reveal more details about his involvement. During a third round of questioning, detectives confronted Evan with the GPS data and the damning text messages. His earlier bravado had all but vanished, replaced by visible signs of distress, sweating, trembling hands, and averted eyes. As the evidence mounted, Evan broke down. Through tears, he confessed to a larger role than he had initially admitted. Evan revealed that Adam had called him in a panic after an argument with Emily escalated into violence. According to Evan, Adam had hit Emily with a heavy wrench during their fight, rendering her unconscious. Believing she was dead, Adam had immediately called Evan for help. When Evan arrived, Adam was pacing frantically in the garage, muttering about how his life was over. Together, they wrapped Emily's body in the rope and placed her in the back of the truck. Evan admitted that he had suggested Ridgewood River as the dumping site, thinking its remote location would ensure the body would never be found. What he didn't anticipate was the weight of guilt that would haunt him. He claimed that he had begged Adam to turn himself in, but was met with threats and accusations, leaving him too scared to act on his conscience. With Evan's expanded confession, detectives had enough to formally arrest Adam on charges of first-degree murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but Adam remained defiant. Even as he was led into custody, he maintained his innocence, insisting that the events had been an accident blown out of proportion. The investigation also turned its focus to the broader implications of Adam's behavior. Detectives revisited Emily's previous statements to friends about feeling trapped in her marriage, noting a pattern of escalating control and jealousy. They interviewed former co-workers of Adam, who described him as temperamental and prone to outbursts, particularly when things didn't go his way. One co-worker recounted a specific incident where Adam had been reprimanded for smashing tools in a fit of rage, a detail that painted a clearer picture of his volatile temperament. Emily's family, though devastated, provided valuable insight into the final weeks of her life. Her mother recounted how Emily had confided in her about wanting to leave Adam, but was afraid of how he might react. Friends confirmed that Emily had started looking for an apartment in secret, further supporting the theory that her death stemmed from a toxic dynamic that culminated in violence. As the evidence mounted, the prosecution prepared to charge both Adam and Evan. While Adam faced first-degree murder charges, Evan was charged with being an accessory to murder and tampering with evidence. The case against them was solid, but the road to justice was far from over. Both men would face their day in court, and Emily's family hoped that the truth would finally bring them some measure of peace. Willow Creek, once a town defined by its quiet charm, now bore the weight of tragedy. The story of Emily Clark was no longer just about her disappearance. It was a stark reminder of how dangerous unchecked control and jealousy could become. As the community grappled with the shock of her death, the investigation forged ahead, determined to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. With the arrests of Adam Clark and Evan Foster, the case seemed to be on the verge of resolution. Yet, for the detectives leading the investigation, nagging questions persisted. The timeline still had gaps. Evan's confessions were riddled with inconsistencies, and Adam's unyielding denial hinted at a truth even darker than what had been uncovered so far. Determined to leave no stone unturned, the investigative team pushed deeper, hoping to uncover the missing pieces that would seal the case. The first breakthrough came from forensic evidence recovered from the Ridgewood River. In addition to Emily's body, divers discovered a wrench buried in the silt, its surface stained with blood. DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Emily, solidifying the weapon as the source of her fatal head injury. This discovery contradicted Adam's claims of an accidental argument turned tragic. If Emily's death was truly an accident, why go to such lengths to dispose of the weapon? Meanwhile, phone records revealed another unsettling detail. A series of text messages between Adam and an unknown number just hours before Emily's disappearance suggested he may have been seeking assistance from someone other than Evan. The messages were cryptic, but phrases like "need help tonight" and "can't do this alone" raised suspicions that a third party might have been involved. Investigators traced the number to a local acquaintance of Adam's, a man named Brian Haynes, known for his reputation as a petty criminal and a supplier of illicit substances. When confronted, Brian denied any involvement, claiming that his exchanges with Adam were strictly about a debt Adam owed him. Yet his body language, averted gaze, fidgeting hands, told a different story. Detectives pressed harder, pointing out the incriminating timing of the texts and Brian's proximity to the Clark residence on the night of Emily's disappearance, as confirmed by cell tower data. Cornered, Brian eventually admitted that Adam had contacted him that evening but insisted he had no direct role in the events that followed. According to Brian, Adam had been desperate and panicked, ranting about needing to fix a mistake. This new lead cast doubt on Evan's claim that he was the only one Adam had involved. Detectives suspected that Brian might have been recruited to assist with disposing of evidence or covering up the crime. To test this theory, they subpoenaed security footage from businesses along the route between Adam's house and Ridgewood River. Their diligence paid off when a camera at a remote truck stop captured Adam's truck parked alongside another vehicle, a battered sedan registered to Brian, at 11:30 p.m., the night Emily disappeared. The footage showed two men transferring an object wrapped in a tarp from the sedan into the truck's bed. Though the image quality was poor, the timeline aligned perfectly with the known movements of Adam's truck. The discovery of Brian's involvement reignited Evan's interrogation. Presented with the footage, Evan's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. He confessed that Brian had indeed been involved, not just in moving Emily's body, but also in concocting the plan to make her death appear like an unsolvable disappearance. According to Evan, Brian had suggested using the river to conceal the crime, and had even helped procure the rope and the heavy rock used to weigh down Emily's body. The plan, Evan claimed, had been entirely orchestrated by Adam and Brian, with Evan reluctantly assisting under pressure. Brian's arrest soon followed, and his initial denial gave way to a reluctant admission of partial involvement. He claimed that Adam had called him in a fit of rage after the argument with Emily escalated. By the time Brian arrived at the Clark residence, Emily was already unconscious, possibly dead. Brian's role, as he described it, was purely logistical, helping Adam and Evan execute a plan that Adam had already decided upon. Yet his insistence on distancing himself from the violence raised questions about the true nature of his involvement. As investigators pieced together the accounts of Adam, Evan, and Brian, the picture that emerged was one of calculated desperation. Adam's motive became increasingly clear. Faced with the prospect of Emily leaving him, and fueled by a toxic combination of jealousy and paranoia, he had lashed out violently. Brian's and Evan's roles, while less direct, were no less significant in enabling the crime and attempting to cover it up. The dynamic among the three men revealed a disturbing hierarchy: Adam as the manipulative mastermind, Brian as the enabler, and Evan as the reluctant accomplice. Despite the progress, detectives were haunted by a lingering sense that more secrets remained buried. Emily's family revealed that she had been keeping a journal in the months leading up to her death, chronicling her fears and frustrations in her marriage. The journal was eventually located in her belongings, its entries providing chilling insights into Adam's escalating control and emotional abuse. One entry, dated just days before her disappearance, read, "I feel like I'm trapped, and I don't know how to get out without making him angry. I'm scared of what he might do." The journal not only underscored the premeditated nature of Adam's actions, but also added a poignant layer of tragedy to Emily's story. In light of these revelations, the prosecution prepared an airtight case against Adam, Evan, and Brian. The evidence now spanned forensic discoveries, witness testimonies, digital records, and psychological analyses, each piece fitting into a narrative of control, betrayal, and violence. Adam faced charges of first-degree murder, while Evan and Brian were charged as accessories and conspirators. Their trials promised to bring further clarity to the events of that fateful night. For the people of Willow Creek, the investigation had revealed an uncomfortable truth. Beneath the town's serene exterior lay the capacity for darkness, a reminder that evil often hides in plain sight. And for Emily's family, the fight for justice continued, their grief tempered by a determination to ensure that her story would not be forgotten. As the trial date approached, the prosecution meticulously organized their case. Adam Clark remained stoic in his denials, while Evan Foster and Brian Haynes attempted to negotiate plea deals, each eager to minimize their roles in the crime. But the prosecution, armed with an overwhelming array of evidence, refused to waver. Their strategy was clear: dismantle the web of lies and expose the full extent of the trio's culpability. The courtroom proceedings began in a packed house with reporters and community members filling the benches. The once quiet town of Willow Creek was now at the center of a gripping narrative of betrayal and murder. The prosecution opened with a timeline of events, weaving together forensic data, witness testimonies, and digital records to paint a chilling picture of Adam's calculated actions. They highlighted his controlling behavior, the escalation of arguments in his marriage, and his desperate attempts to maintain dominance when Emily began to pull away. Key testimony came from the forensic pathologist, who described Emily's injuries in stark detail. The blunt force trauma to her head, inflicted by the wrench found in the river, was consistent with a violent blow, but it was the evidence of drowning, water in her lungs, that drew audible gasps from the courtroom. Emily had still been alive when she was thrown into the icy depths of Ridgewood River, bound and weighted down to ensure she would never surface. The inhumanity of the act shattered any lingering doubts about the premeditated nature of the crime. Evan Foster's testimony provided a damning account of Adam's manipulation and the sequence of events leading to Emily's death. His voice trembled as he recounted the night, describing how Adam had called him in a panic, claiming he had made a mistake and needed help. Evan admitted to helping dispose of Emily's body, but insisted that he had been coerced, driven by fear of Adam's threats. While his attempt to minimize his involvement drew skepticism, his detailed account aligned with the physical evidence, reinforcing the prosecution's case. Brian Haynes' testimony introduced another layer of complexity. Unlike Evan, Brian was unapologetic, portraying himself as a reluctant but pragmatic participant. He admitted to suggesting Ridgewood River as the disposal site and assisting in securing the ropes and weights used to submerge Emily's body. However, Brian's defense strategy hinged on the argument that his involvement was limited to covering up the crime, not its execution. The prosecution countered by emphasizing his role in enabling Adam's actions and his lack of remorse. The most emotionally charged moment of the trial came when Emily's mother, Karen Harper, took the stand. Her voice quivered as she described the days leading up to her daughter's disappearance, sharing Emily's fears and plans to leave Adam. She read excerpts from Emily's journal, including the haunting final entry. "If I leave, he'll never let me go. I don't know what to do." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. The defense attempted to portray Adam as a man pushed to the edge, arguing that Emily's death was a tragic accident resulting from a heated argument. They emphasized his clean record since overcoming his substance abuse and painted him as a man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of emotional turmoil. But the prosecution dismantled this narrative piece by piece, highlighting Adam's controlling behavior, his calculated attempts to dispose of evidence, and his manipulative efforts to involve others in covering up the crime. As the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that the jury would have little difficulty reaching a verdict. The weight of the evidence, combined with the testimony of Evan and Brian, left no room for reasonable doubt. Adam Clark had orchestrated the events of that fateful night, driven by jealousy and a need to control. His actions had not only taken Emily's life, but had also shattered the lives of everyone around her. In their closing arguments, the prosecution reminded the jury of Emily's humanity. They spoke of her dreams, her kindness, and the vibrant life she had built before it was cruelly taken from her. They urged the jury to deliver a verdict that would honor her memory and ensure justice was served. The defense, in their final plea, asked the jury to consider Adam's remorse and the circumstances that led to his actions. But their words rang hollow in the face of the overwhelming evidence. After days of deliberation, the jury returned their verdicts. Adam Clark was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Evan Foster received a 15-year sentence for his role as an accessory, while Brian Haynes was sentenced to 20 years for conspiracy and evidence tampering. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow. For Emily's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, though the pain of losing her could never truly be erased. For the community of Willow Creek, the trial was a somber reminder of the darkness that can hide behind closed doors. As the dust settled, Emily's story became a catalyst for change. Her family established a foundation in her name, dedicated to raising awareness about domestic abuse and supporting those trapped in toxic relationships. They vowed to ensure that her legacy would be one of hope, resilience, and justice. The trial of Adam Clark, Evan Foster, and Brian Haynes concluded with the resounding verdicts of guilt, but the echoes of Emily Clark's tragic death continued to ripple through the community of Willow Creek. Her story, though horrifying in its details, became a beacon of awareness for the dangers that often go unnoticed behind closed doors. In the weeks following the sentencing, Emily's family found themselves grappling with a mix of relief and profound grief. The courtroom verdict had brought justice, but it could never fill the void left by her absence. Karen Harper, Emily's mother, described it best when she said, "Justice gives us closure, but not peace. Peace will only come when we use Emily's story to protect others." This conviction spurred the Harper family into action. They established the Emily Clark Foundation, a nonprofit organization aimed at raising awareness about the warning signs of abusive relationships and offering resources to those who feel trapped. The foundation's mission extended beyond Emily's story, advocating for a society where emotional and psychological abuse would no longer be minimized or ignored. The case also ignited difficult but necessary conversations in Willow Creek and beyond. Communities began discussing the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships, controlling behavior, unwarranted jealousy, and isolation from loved ones. Emily's journal entries, shared publicly with the family's permission, became a stark reminder of the silent battles many individuals face. Her words, raw and unfiltered, resonated with countless people, inspiring some to seek help and others to become more vigilant for those around them. From a legal perspective, the case highlighted systemic gaps in addressing emotional abuse before it escalates to violence. Advocates called for stronger resources for victims, including counseling services, legal aid, and public education campaigns. Emily's story became a case study for law enforcement and community leaders seeking to improve intervention strategies for at-risk individuals. As the years passed, the foundation flourished, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of Willow Creek. Survivors of abuse began sharing their stories, drawing strength from Emily's legacy. Hotlines reported an increase in calls from individuals seeking help, many citing the visibility of Emily's case as their motivation to act. Her life, though cut short, became a catalyst for change. For the town of Willow Creek, the tragedy left a lasting impact. The close-knit community, once shaken by the horrific crime, found a way to heal through unity and purpose. Vigils were held in Emily's honor, and her memory was immortalized in a mural painted near Ridgewood River, a vibrant depiction of her smiling face surrounded by symbols of hope and resilience. It became a place of reflection, not just for her family, but for anyone seeking solace or inspiration. The case also served as a stark reminder of how complicity can enable tragedy. Evan Foster and Brian Haynes, while not directly responsible for Emily's death, had played pivotal roles in covering up the crime. Their actions demonstrated the dangers of loyalty when it blinds individuals to morality and justice. Their sentences, though lesser than Adam's, carried a clear message. Silence and complicity in the face of wrongdoing have consequences. For Adam Clark, life in prison provided little solace. The man who had once sought control over every aspect of his life now faced the ultimate loss of freedom. Reports from inside the prison suggested that he remained defiant, refusing to take full responsibility for his actions. But his denials held no weight against the truth that had been meticulously uncovered. Adam's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how unchecked jealousy and possessiveness could spiral into unthinkable violence. In reflecting on Emily's life and death, her mother shared a message that resonated far beyond the boundaries of Willow Creek. Emily was a light in our lives, and though that light was stolen from us, it can still guide others. If her story saves even one person from harm, then her life will have created something greater than her loss. The lessons from Emily's tragedy were clear. Abuse in any form thrives in silence. Recognizing the signs, speaking out, and offering support can mean the difference between life and death. Her story underscored the need for vigilance, not only in personal relationships but within communities, where early intervention could prevent future tragedies. Emily's memory lived on, not only in the hearts of those who loved her, but in the countless lives touched by the awareness her story inspired. Her legacy became a call to action, a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable loss, hope can emerge, justice can prevail, and change can be achieved. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories.